Hi everybody and welcome to the Tesrex YouTube channel. This video is a quick demonstration of how Duo integrates with the Cisco Identity Services Engine, providing two-factor authentication for network device login. This is how it looks in action. After opening an SSH session to a device and entering my username and password, I'm prompted for a second factor of authentication by the Duo mobile app. Access to the device command line is only granted after approving a prompt on my mobile device. This video is intended as an introduction to an interesting two-factor authentication use case. While many multi-factor authentication discussions focus on cloud-based applications, the potential harm caused by compromised device admin credentials can be catastrophic. By integrating Duo and Cisco ISE, this risk can be substantially mitigated. Here's an overview in the environment being used in this demonstration. I have a Microsoft Windows 2016 domain controller for the domain mangoseclab.com, a vanilla domain member server, which I'll install the Duo authentication proxy service on, a Cisco CSR 1000V, which is my target device for protection, and the Cisco Identity Services Engine to demonstrate integration of a second authentication factor with TACX later on. But to start with, the focus will be implementing Active Directory credential login to the CSR command line, with a second factor of authentication as additional protection. Obviously, a Duo account is required to follow along with this video. However, if you don't have one, you can sign up for a Duo trial account at signup.duo.com, and this will give you access to many Duo features for 30 days. Here's a Duo demo account I created earlier for this demonstration. The first thing we're going to do is get our Active Directory sync set up so that we can get some users into the Duo admin portal. So I'll drop into Users Directory Sync and you'll see we've got three options here. Azure AD, On-Premise AD, which is one we're going to use, and open LDAP. Add a new Active Directory. The directory name is only used in Duo for internal reference, so you can use whatever you like here. Server is the domain controller you're going to use for LDAP lookups for user accounts. As we're using secure LDAP, the contact port is 636. Otherwise, you might need to use 389 if you're in a clear text LDAP environment as indicated. As we're going to install the Duo authentication proxy service on a member server, I can use integrated authentication here. Under directory sync settings, I'm going to just use the base of the LDAP tree for simplicity's sake in this demonstration. You may wish to restrict the tree in order to get answers to queries quicker in a live environment. Duo gives you an option to automatically send enrollment emails out to users that are newly synced with the service if their email addresses are populated in Active Directory. I'm not going to select that here because I'm going to show a manual enrollment process later on in the video. Similarly, there's an option to import phones automatically if users have mobile phone information pre-populated in AD and you're intending to use those devices as second factors, then that can save you a lot of time getting users to run through the enrollment process. But again, I'm not going to use that here. And we'll click Add Directory. And that gets Duo ready to go ahead and allow us to get our first sync set up. Now you'll notice after I've hit Add Directory here, we do have some additional settings that have popped up under Directory Sync. So one of them is the transport type, and as we're using secure LDAP, there are a few extra configuration options you need to make in a secure LDAP environment. We're going to check the SSL verify hostname just so the Duo authentication proxy knows to verify the certificate that the DC presents for secure LDAP against the hostname expects to see. And in the SSL CA certs, you'll need to paste in the entire chain of the CA cert that issued the DC secure LDAP certificate. So I'm going to go ahead and paste these in from one I created earlier. These need to be PEM formatted certificates as pointed out by the Duo admin portal. So first I'll paste in the issuing route and then the intermediate. And now again we'll save directory now that the secure LDAP specific configuration is complete. Okay, now we can go ahead with installing the Duo authentication proxy on our member server. So there's a link for the instructions to the installation here. The authentication proxy is supported on both Windows and Linux servers. I'm not going to run through the installation process for both server types here, we'll just use our Windows member server, but there'll be a link to a reference guide for the installation instructions below this video. Duo will give you a skeleton configuration file for the Auth proxy. You'll see Auth proxy CFG here, and that mainly contains the cloud-specific configuration in this section that allows the Duo authentication proxy to contact the Duo cloud service, and it knows which instances it's associated with, etc. So I'm just going to download the skeleton config here. And then we'll hop over to our member server to install the Duo authentication proxy service. There's no actual configuration during the installation, it's all done post-install. I'll just paste in that skeleton config file, so that's ready for later. Okay, now once we're installed, we can carry on with the rest of the configuration. Simply drop into the Duo Security Authentication Proxy install folder. You'll see it as a conf subfolder, and that contains an auth proxy file. We're going to copy R1 over that. And you'll see this has the cloud values pre-populated from the admin console. Now as we're doing LDAP sync, we need to set up a client to talk to Active Directory. So we'll do that in the section here. Here's a few configuration parameters you need. So first is the host, which is the main controller you're going to use for lookups again. You'll need a service account which you use to query Active Directory, so I've gone ahead and previously created one here. And you'll also need to enter the password for that account. Similar to how we set up the admin portal, we also need to specify our search DN. So again, I'm just going to use the base of the LDAP tree here. You want to make sure this matches what you have set up on the admin portal. Now, there's an additional option here I'm going to use, which is to specify an Active Directory security group that I want users to be a member of. And if they're not a member of that group, then they can't authenticate using Duo, using an Auth proxy. So you'll see I set up one already on the DC. So we're going to put the Duo testing security group, which I've just put in users. Obviously in a live environment, you'd likely have this in a service account OU. This needs to be the LDAP path. You may need to use an LDAP query tool if you're not sure how to get the full LDAP path for your security group. And you specify the transport method for secure LDAP. And again, similar to how we configure the admin portal, we need to put in the Auth proxy config file a path where it can obtain the CA certificate that's used to check validity as a domain controller secure LDAP certificate. So I'm just going to copy certificate into the conf folder. And we'll just specify that path. And similar to what we set up on the admin portal, we'll force the authentication proxy to verify the hostname of the percent certificate. And that completes our Active Directory specific configuration. So we should be able to go ahead now and complete our first sync with Duo. Now we'll start the Duo Auth proxy service on the member server. Now, if we hop back to the Duo admin portal, so you've been prompted to refresh the page. And the objective is to be able to select groups in the drop-down. And you see that's gone from grey to white, and it will now list security groups that it can find under the search DN in Active Directory. So we'll fish out our Duo testing group. And with that done, we can now click Sync Now to force our first sync. And as you can see, we've got a success message at the directory sync saying completed successfully. We synced one user in one group. And if we head back to users, we should see our test user populated with this email account attribute already pulled from AD. And we'll use this in the next section to enroll that user into Duo with a test Android device. With our user now showing up in the admin portal, I'm going to go through a manual enrollment process. So let's drop into our user here. And as you see, you get a warning that the user is from a sync directory, and therefore some of the fields are read-only. That includes the email field. As you see, I can't make any changes to it. So if you are intending to send out enrollment emails, you do need to make sure that your Active Directory mail attributes are pre-populated. You can see in the top right here, I've got an option to send an enrollment email. So we'll do that now. And that will trigger an email going to the test account, which I've set up on the virtual Android device. So you can see we've received an email prompting us to enroll with Duo on this device. The email is automated, but you can edit the template. I'll show you where that is in the Duo admin portal. If we go back to settings, the very last option in settings is enrollment email. So you can include your logo, you can change your text to something that might be a bit more user friendly. I'm just going to use the default here. So on our Android device, we're prompted to click a link to enroll. We'll do that now. And this takes us up to Duo to start the enrollment process. So we'll click on Start Setup. In this case, I'm going to select tablet, as we don't have a phone associated with this virtual Android device. We'll be prompted to install the Duo mobile application from whichever application store, depending on what platform you're coming from. So I'm going to select to install Duo Mobile from Google Play. Go ahead and click Install. Once the install is complete, just pop back to our Duo Mobile enrollment. And this time I'll select that I already have Duo Mobile installed. Launch the app. Once registration is completed, we can see in the mobile app the name of the organisation we're registered to, and the app will start generating manual one-time passcodes. These can be used as a backup in case there is no data connection for the phone to receive pushed authentication requests. From the admin console, we can verify that my device is registered correctly by dropping into the Users menu and clicking on my username. Scrolling down to the phone section shows the newly registered device and gives the administrator information on the device type. We can verify connectivity by sending a manual push request using the Send Duo Push option at the top right of the screen. Our push notification arrives and we can hit Approve to confirm its validity. In order to configure the Duo authentication proxy as a Radius server to answer requests from the CSR, we need to add a Radius application on Duo that will give us cloud integration credentials we need. So if we go to Applications and Protect an application, I'll just type in Radius. You see there is a generic Radius application, which is the one I want to use here. I'll click Protect this application, and this will give again a set of cloud credentials for the service to connect to Duo with to identify this application. We'll need these to go and set up the Duo authentication proxy, which we will do now. So back on the Duo Auth proxy, we need to add another section to the configuration file for the Radius service. Now, there are a number of Radius configurations you can use, and further information is available in the Duo authentication proxy reference guide, which again will link under this video. I'm just going to use the auto config for simplicity's sake in this demo environment. So let me just add a new section to the config called radius_server_auto. There's a few configuration parameters here. One is the cloud credentials from the Duo admin portal, so I'll just transfer those across. The next is what client IPs we're going to accept requests from. So in our case, it's just going to be the single CSR, which is on 192.168.41.6. And we can add additional devices, or we could specify a CI/DR block or address range. We need to tie this radio service to which client we're going to use for authentication lookups. So in our case, it's just the previous section of config with the Active Directory client configuration. And as with all Radius integrations, we need to set a shared secret between the router and the client device. Okay, and that's our Duo authentication proxy Radius configuration completed. We will need to restart the service for it to take effect. And we should be all done, and we'll proceed to configure the Cisco router for Radius Auth in a moment. So in our CSR, we've configured a new model AAA with the local username and password. And what we're going to do in this section is add the Radius AAA configuration we need to get the command line authenticated against Duo rather than the local database. So one thing to note is the authentication proxy we'll use is the new standard radius ports 1812 and 1813 as opposed to the older ports. One key part of the configuration for the Duo Auth proxy is the timeout value. Now obviously, second factor authentication TAC can take significantly longer than the usual. Your user may be in a poor coverage area or may be in a situation where it takes them a little while to answer the prompts on their phone. So this is definitely a parameter worth experimenting with. I'm going to set it to 60, that's a good starting point, but you may need to increase that depending on your user experience and feedback. With the radius service configured, we can now set up a AAA group and associate that server with it. And we can run through a test authentication from the command line. We should see an authentication prompt on our Android device. You can see it popped up at the top of the screen there. And we'll click approve. And you can see, if you head back to our CSR, that the authentication test was a success. So now we're ready to go ahead and set this up, applied to the VTY lines. So from the CSR command line, we'll just create a new AAA authentication method list. You will see dual authentication proxy at the first authentication servers fall back to the local database. Which applying this authentication method to the VTY lines. And then if we kick off an SSH session via PuTTY, we'll log in with our Active Directory username and password and hop over to our Android device. And you can see we've already been prompted to approve the login request. Let's also look at how we can integrate Duo into an environment where we're using Cisco ISE and TACX for user authentication and authorization. So off camera, I've reconfigured the CSR to use Cisco ISE for AAA for SSH sessions. So I'll just log into the command line of the CSR here. I can see this time we didn't have the pools for two-factor authentication, and if I hop over to ISE and refresh the TACX live log, you can see we've just generated an event here for my login. So the key to the integration of ISE in the authentication proxy is to realize that ISE can use radius token servers as an external identity source. So what we're going to do is set up the Duo authentication proxy as a radius token source in ISE. And then we're going to reconfigure our TACX authentication policy to use Duo authentication proxy as its identity source for authentication. So I'm going to drop into admin external identity sources in ISE. And under radius token, I'll add a new service. Call it Duo Auth proxy. And here in the connection tab under primary server, we want to specify the Duo authentication proxy IP and the radius shared secret. Let me just click submit. Okay, now that we've configured the Duo Auth proxy as a radius identity source, we can drop into our policy set. Again, I have a very simple default TACX policy set configured. All we're going to be doing in the authorization policy is just to check whether the user is a member of the Duo testing AD group. And under our authentication policy at this moment, I'm using this Mango SecLab identity source, which is just the ISE Active Directory integration. If we remove that, I'll change it to our new Duo Auth proxy config. And the one last thing we'll need to do is hop over to the Duo authentication proxy, and we just have to change the radius client IP address. So instead of coming from the CSR directly, the radius request will now come from ISE. And then we just need to restart the Duo authentication proxy service. Okay, and now with that restarted, one last thing to do is, again, similar to when we configured the radius timeout for an extended period for two-factor authentication, we're going to need to change the TACX server config on the CSR to allow for an extended period for ISE to talk to the Duo authentication proxy and trigger a second factor of authentication. So here I'm going to log on at the console. And I've already configured a TACX server. So again, I'll set the timeout to 60 seconds. And then this time now, if we hop over to PuTTY, open a new SSH session. You can see if I hop over to the Android device, we have a request waiting to approve. And now that that's approved, I'm logged into the CSR and we still have visibility of the session in ISE. Thanks for watching. We hope this video helped. If you have any questions about the process or any questions regarding Duo in general, please don't hesitate to contact us or leave a comment in the comment section below. Thank you.